I don't know if my mom can get through all this. My dad, although he passed away last Wednesday, in truth, we lost him many years ago. His death came as a shock, I think, to myself and everybody, but I had been mourning his passing for quite some time. So the reason I learned to hate Alzheimer's is that it took away the man that I knew well before his time. So this morning I'm not going to concentrate on the last 5 years, I'm going to go over the first 80 or so. So relax. There are so many things I learned from my father. To be honest to a fault. The sadness comes in waves. You never know what's going to hit you. I can't lie because of my dad. Never cheat. Always be fair. Oh, he hated this one. He used to coach my baseball teams, basketball teams, and if we're losing, he still insisted on putting every kid in the game. Didn't matter if they're on crutches and wheelchairs, didn't matter. And this is where I learned that integrity is more important than winning. His old boss, Bart Kaufman from Indianapolis Life, said he never met a man with more integrity. Work hard. Do what you have to do before you do what you want to do. We hated that one too. But it's how I live my life, so now my kids hate it. And I can only hope that their kids will come to hate it as well. You're allowed 1 beer a week after you mow the lawn and have hamburgers on Saturday nights. My father was a creature of habit. If it worked once, there was no reason to change. It's good to laugh. I can remember sitting around watching the TV on Saturday night, watching All in the Family, Bob Newhart show, Mary Tyler Moore show. We'd all cry. We were laughing so hard. He was also funny. I learned comedy from Bill Cosby and my dad. I loved to watch him work a room. He was great at family relations and when the relatives got together. Later, when I started making my living as a comic, I came home in a family gathering and I started to take over the conversation. And I saw the power shift was hurting my dad. He was sensitive, he didn't know that. I guess it wasn't demonstrative, but he was sensitive. So when I saw that in him, I just backed off because I didn't need it. It was more fun to watch my dad be the king of his castle. Be humble. My mom agreed with this, but for some reason she thought my dad said we should pronounce it humble. So we teased her mercilessly for that one. So it was like, humble, oh, hey governor, would you ask the A's and Eric's? So that's what we did with our mom. We learned to tease her. He was a humble man who wasn't interested in touting his own accomplishments. He wanted to know about you and make you feel comfortable. So he asked questions. He never stopped asking questions. Usually started with, say. My favorite question of all time was at my cousin Annie and Chris's wedding back in the early 70s. Chris's bandmates were hanging out with my dad and he asked, so, you think the Beatles will get back together? I didn't say it was hip, I said he was... Be kind-hearted and friendly. Last night's viewing was just a testimony to this. We stood for 3 hours over here as people from this church walked by and from New Hope and said how much our dad touched them, as Mark talked about. He remembered something about each of them. Yes, he wrote it down. He remembered. He was always asking people how they were and glad that they came. And so many people came by it last night. He just said the reason they came to New Hope was because of my dad. So I don't know what that says about the preaching. I'm sorry. But this is all to the gym. Sorry. It was amazing watching my father truly build this church, starting off at the basement of a funeral home, which I found very ironic for a church. It's like, well, accept this or go there. And a Conner farm, and then a high school where they took in the churches, took in the chairs every single day and brought them out, and then finally this church. It's just what it is today. It's just amazing to see this grow in the community that he was part of building. Have faith. His faith was a very big part of who he was. He went to church every Sunday and men's Bible study every Saturday morning, like clockwork. He had enough faith to let me go through my own rebellion when I decided I didn't want to go to church in junior high. He let me stay home for about 3 years until I finally decided I wanted to go on my own. Looking back, I just think he didn't want to be late. But we'll go for the bigger picture. loyal and faithful. My dad was the innocent flirt, but I never doubted a moment for his love and commitment to my mom. He loved attention. When any of my friends from high school would come over, Mimi Kraft is here, they came up and talked to him, he would go, "She's got personality. I like her. She's got personality." Another friend called me and said whenever she was over, he'd always go, "Elaine, who you courting?" So that was just, he would always tease, have fun. He was a teaser. His generation wasn't demonstrative with love, wasn't a hugger, didn't get emotional. He just assumed that you knew he loved you. He did it through action. He provided for us. He was there. With me, he came to watch every game. He coached most of them. I had no doubt. My dad loved me. My sister and brother didn't have the sport, so maybe he teased them, or maybe they just needed it. Fashion and style don't matter. I have to say we all rebelled against that one. He just didn't care about trends or what was popular. He could care less about keeping up with the Joneses. He came out of the Great Depression. Simplicity was the key to life. He had the worst taste in cars. He was so trusting, he never haggled. I had to learn haggling on my own. He would go to a dealer because of a relationship with some salesman and just take the worst car on the lot. He didn't care. The first car they showed him, he would take it. I think they had a running bet. Surely Jim won't take this one, and he did every time. He bought a Dodge Demon with a steering wheel about this big that my mother could not steer. There was no power steering because that was, he wouldn't pay for that. And it had this Demon decal, this huge Demon decal on the hood of the car. So he drove it into church at Orchard Park, and they teased him mercilessly. So he had to go back to the dealer, take the dealer off, take the decal off. We were hoping they'd take the car, but he kept the car. So he wouldn't get air conditioning. That was another thing. In our house or our cars, his constant excuse was the Pioneers didn't have air conditioning, which drove us all crazy because the Pioneers didn't have running water either. But as one time we're driving on a hot summer day with the windows down because we're dying with no air conditioning, and my sister saw some of her friends, and she was embarrassed we didn't have air conditioning, so we all had to roll up our windows. So we sweat to death, so her friends would think that we had air conditioning. But he did it because he was the kind of man who would support the people he loved even though he didn't understand or couldn't relate to what they wanted, which pretty much sums up all of his kids. He couldn't relate or understand any of this. He was the kind of man who would support people. He was a numbers guy. That's who he was. That's what insurance is. That's why he went into insurance. You put figures into an actuary table and you calculate how much money you'll make within particular parameters. You can understand that. That was manageable. Within reason, you can control your environment. But art, show business, design, these were so beyond him. But that's what his children went into. But he was still patient and understanding, and even though what we did was way outside of his comfort zone, he encouraged us to follow our dreams. He never understood my career, never. He'd call every Sunday at 4 o'clock, again, habit, if it works once you do it, and try to explain how TV studios worked, and after a long-winded explanation of pilots and mid-season pickups, he'd ask, "Are they paying yet?" "Yes, they're paying yet." "Well, okay, here's your money." He was not a complicated man. He wanted things boiled down to their essentials, the simple pleasures. That's why he loved Cardinals baseball and country music. He loved to sing the same song over and over again. He could not sing, which is probably why he married a singer. He was smart. You did not want to go toe-to-toe with my dad. He had a calendar trick, which I still cannot figure out. No matter what day you threw at him, date, he always knew what day it fell on. I don't know how many of you ever heard that, but it was some kind of numbers racket. I had no idea what he did. And it was too late to ask him by the end. At this point in my life, I know the kind of people I like to hang around. And I just realized this very recently. You have to be smart, quick-witted, but also deep. If you're funny all the time, we're always serious and morose, I don't have the time for you. And I realized that was my dad. He was funny, he was deep, he was the perfect guy. Before I close, I do want to give a shout out to my dad's caregiver, Kelly. She was sitting in the back. Where did she go? She's right over there. I can't tell you how much this woman helped us at the end. She delayed going to school to be a surgical assistant because of my father, and I just can't think of her. At his passing, my cousin Jody wrote that Dad was her hero. My cousin Annie said we just lost one of the good guys, and we did. I don't know how he did it. It was just good. A lot of people have a hard time. Man, it does. It comes away. I knew it was going to do it to the end. A lot of people have a hard time with the commandment to honor their mother and father. Never had that problem. I have a hard time with other commandments, but not that one. Because he was such an honorable man, that was an easy one to follow.